this is Trev and welcome to my blog. This time round I'm going to talk about studs and stud welding. What do I mean by that? Well, this is a stud that holds the heat shield on from an exhaust box. Quick close up. So you may have taken down an exhaust once upon a time and removed the heat shield from above, and you can see this stud hanging down and it seems to be magically attached to the panel underneath. Well, this has been done via spot weld technology, which is really great because it's a great way of being able to attach a very small stud to a steel panel. So it's spot welded to a steel panel and there's no hole drilled through the panel, so there's no head on the top. It's flush mounted, and this is what this video is all about and why I've made the video, because it's an extremely useful little thing to be able to create if you own a spot welder of some description, because I converted my two-sided spot welder into an extremely effective stud welder, and I can hang these real quite big studs off that. What I've also found very useful is attaching the M4. So I've got some M4s and some M5 studs, and I can weld those on and I can use them for bolting back wiring harnesses. And my catering conversion on the inside of my van, I spot welded these studs all the way around and I was able to bolt quite big expanses of bodywork together. Obviously there's no load on this kind of thing, but it didn't need to be, and it's far better doing this than to drill a hole through and have a bolt head on the inside. So it's a very useful thing to be able to do this. It's neat, it takes seconds to do once you've set up the kit for it. Like I say, no hole drilled through, no head the other side, no spinning bolt in a hole or anything like that, and as long as it's welded on, it's got little chance of breaking free, really. Here's my old spot welder. I've been through all the stuff I've got and I've managed to find a few ends, a few old ends. I mean, when I bought the welder I was given a load of these copper ends. What I've done is I've butchered these up, modified them and drilled a hole in this one. Drilled a hole for it to accept the M6. So that's going to go in there like that. That drops in there. So I've got a piece of metal in there now. So that metal is pinched between the electrodes and the stud the other side. And it worked a minute ago. Let's see if it works again. So I've given it a blast. Just let it cool off for a second. Trying to do this holding the camera is nearly impossible, but with a tripod it's no good really. I can't show you enough using a tripod all the time. Anyway, hey, that's looking pretty good, isn't it? Got a stud on there now, and this stud red hot, of course. Got an M6 here. This stud, of course, will just screw onto this stud now. Look at that. Lovely. And it's nice and neat. Hardly any distortion at all. That's a solid job, that is. The other thing that I've done is I found an electrode that will fit up in my dent puller handle. So I've converted my new dent puller spot welder into a single-sided spot welder that takes these exhaust heat shield studs and also takes the other studs, the M4s, the M5s, and I think it's the M6s as well. The only thing I would say is I have to convert the stud, the end of it, into a little peak. So I just filed a little peak in the top of it, and what this does, this increases the welding efficiency because the welder's not quite up to it, but if you file that little peak, then like I say, you increase the welding efficiency and I can do repairs like this one. So I'm round the back of the catering conversion in my van, and these are the studs that I've welded on. I've welded them all the way across the top as well, inside, across the sides. The other thing I did as well is I've made this LPG tank to run a dual fuel coffee machine off, and I've also utilised the spot welder to weld on the captive sort of studs on the back. So these studs are also spot welded on using very much the same sort of processes. These are the M6 threaded nuts that I used on my gas box. They're too large to be spot welded to anything, so what the manufacturers have cleverly come up with is they've designed it in a way that it's got an ear at each corner on one side of the nut. So these ears protrude out, and these ears contact the panel that you're welding them to, and then of course the contact point is quite small, so they just fuse together very effectively. These are the spot weld electrodes I made up to weld on the threaded nuts. So this electrode's got a little stud sticking out. It's not threaded in any way, but it's made out of copper. Most important this, when you're making up any sort of electrodes, they really need to be copper if you're spot welding steel, because if you make anything out of steel, then you run the risk of either damaging what you're welding on, or the electrode will stick to the stud or the nut. So everything has to be copper to stop it from sticking. So the nut simply slides over the top of there, and this centralizes it. You've got your panel with a hole in, and the hole slips over the stud, so this can't be really far out then. And then I've simply got a hole in the other electrode clasped together, and then that welds that rather firmly onto the panel. I certainly know that there's going to be a lot of people that are interested in seeing this. This is the void behind my dashboard. There would have been not very much behind here originally, but because I've put this modern fuel injected engine in the van, I had to remove this panel to start with, just to be able to get the engine in, because the engine's a lot taller than the original would have been. I can still get the engine in and out if I make myself a special cradle, and I'll deal with that in the future if this sort of thing arises, which is bound to at some stage. So I've jammed all this stuff in there. I've put a heater behind there, a little racing car heater that would never have been there before, but tons and tons of wiring and cabling, the engine ECU, some management system down in there as well. Lots and lots of stuff that would never have been in there before, and that's why I utilised this void. I cut this panel out, and this panel being out was enormously helpful because I could mount a lot of the wiring and stuff from outside of the van. I didn't have to crush myself into the cab and try and squeeze behind this recess to put all this stuff in. I could fit all this stuff in. My original thoughts were to leave this as a bolted in panel. So this panel, you can see the studs around here coming through. My original plan was to just keep this as a panel that could be removed with some kind of rubber seal behind it. It was gonna look awful. So what I decided to do was go out on a bit of a limb, and I've tried something out. A lot of people are maybe frowning about this sort of thing, but the sheer strength of this bonding product is stronger than steel, so there's no concern with strength particularly. So what I've done is I've put the studs all the way around, welded loads and loads of studs to evenly distribute any load that I'll be putting on the studs as I tighten these nuts up. Obviously I'm not going to over tighten them, but just nip them up. I've used some Loctite nuts, and rather than having it removable, I thought it's going to look dreadful. So what I've decided to do is I've used a product called Panel Bond, which is widely used within the collision repair automotive industry to glue a lot of panels on now. And like I say, the sheer strength, the steel will break either side of the glue. The weakness of the glue product is that it does kind of slightly expand and shrink under extremes of temperatures, which means that you can end up with a ghost line on the outside of the panel. So what I've done to try and eliminate this is I've created a lamination process. So we're now on the outside of the van, and the joint would run along here and down here, and this hasn't been welded in. I state again, this panel hasn't been welded in. This has basically been bonded in. As I said, this can be frowned upon, and really should be frowned upon, as a kind of direct replacement for welding. It isn't that, but in this instance, if I'd welded this panel back in, I would have completely destroyed everything I've done behind. Like I say, all that wiring, that delicate heater, my ECU and everything, and I didn't want to have a permanent joint around here which is only going to let water in and go rusty eventually. So what I've done is I've laminated it using an epoxy paint first, so it's been welded together. My hand looks red. See how red my hand looks? It's because the van's blue. My hand isn't really that red. A lot of people say this when it's against that. It fools the camera and changes the colour because it's so blue. Yeah, as I was saying, so yes, it's joined around here. It's a lap joint. I've quickly sketched out this cross-sectional diagram to give you a better idea of the processes that are involved. The panel work is outlined in black. So these are the two panels joined together in the middle via the stud. Now the stud that I've welded on could be replaced with a rivet or a spot weld. In fact, manufacturing processes often refer to spot welding and bonding at the same time, but not in all cases, of course. So I used a deep joggler on this section and a shallow joggler on this section. The reason being, when the two panels come together in this point, they're flush here, and also the panel work still remains flush here. So what I've done is I've abraded the pieces of metalwork in between where the bond's going to go with 36 grit grinding disc. You must never ever apply a primer in between. It always must be applied directly to bare metal. So I've put the panel bond in. It's got little glass beads, so you can't completely compress all the bond out when you squeeze the two panels together. It will always ooze out of the sides, of course. On the inside, just spread it around, because what it does then is it seals up this area really well, so no moisture can ever get between the two panels. Once this is fully cured, I've cleaned everything up really well, trying to get rid of as much of the bonding material as I can out of the void, so no bonding material could possibly be seen. Then I've abraded the whole thing 180. I've applied 2 coats of epoxy primer and allowed at least 7 days for the primer to be fully cured. I've then abraded on top of the primer again with 180 again and filled in the void with fiberglass paste. Once the fiberglass paste has been fully cured, I then sand it back just so that it dips just back into the void again. So now the void is completely full of fiberglass paste. I then put a very thin layer of filler over the top and sand it to perfection before performing the primering and the final top coat stages. This is in no way a time-honoured skill. This is quite a new technology, and what I've done here isn't a normal process. This is an experimental process just to see what happens in the long term, because of course if this is successful I can roll it out for other applications. So we're just going to see what happens, give no guarantees if you're going to do this whatsoever. But what I will say is it's still a very strong joint. As I said before, the bond has a greater shear strength than the steel around it, so it's certainly not limited in strength, but where it is limited is in its thermal expansion properties, because when it gets hot it expands very slightly, and as it cools it contracts very slightly, giving you slight movement in this area. And this is what the lamination process has been all about, just to see if I can get across this issue. So I really hope you found that helpful. Like I say, M4s, M5s, exhaust heat shield studs, bzzzt, they're on there, easy. Remember, no load applications, no M8s, no maybe thinking about using them for your engine mountings. Anyway, I'm off. Before I go though, I would just like to plug a channel, if I may. Alan Mandick's channel called Hot Rod Hippie. I'm sure that many of you have already heard about the Hot Rod Hippie and already know his fabulous content, but for those that don't, just like to say a few things about him. So Alan does the channel, the Hot Rod Hippie. I would say his primary videos are mostly about tools and equipment. So I'm pretty sure he's self-funded. I don't know everything about the guy, but my viewpoint looking at his videos are he's pretty much self-funded, so he'll go off on his own back and buy a really expensive piece of equipment. He will research what he doesn't know relentlessly, find out everything that that piece of equipment does, and then relay all that knowledge to the viewer in really clear terms. Absolutely fantastic. Leaves no stone unturned. I would say that one of my favourite all-time videos, I've probably got 3 favourites, and one of them is his. He did a video about a guy called Steve Shepherd, who is a hobbyist coach work builder, panel beater, builds his own pull maxes and power hammers and all various tools, which leaves me pretty stunned when you think that he's just doing it for a hobby. My goodness. Only made even better by the fact that Alan filmed it a truly cinematic experience. That was really brilliant video, and I'm so impressed with the video that I'm going to put a link to that video in my video description, so you can click on the link and go and subscribe to his channel, watch the video and enjoy the video. It was really good. I'm really proud of you, Alan. Fantastic work, my friend. Yeah, and it is hard work, because when you're in the motor trade, there aren't many breaks, and it's pretty much a one-way street, and you're bashing your head against a brick wall, it feels like, most of the time. Keep up the good work. It is difficult doing YouTube, being in the motor trade, but we're driven by passion and we're driven by interest, and this is what Alan's got. He's got the interest, and that's what's carrying him through and me through, and we're both both doing the same sort of thing. So yeah, fair play, go and check him out, Hot Rod Hippie. Just bought these bad boys. Look at these, look. Smack smooth. Yeah, these lovely G clamps. Just picked these up, and I paid for them out of the money that people donated to me, and thank you very much, guys. Hope to be using these in an up and coming video. Have got another one as well, but I can't carry 3, so flipping heavy. So anyway, I'm off. Bye for now.